He took the blows for the alien child. Now her mother wants the human. Sci-Fi vault. The trade station drifted in open space like a metal city that never slept. Ships came and went every minute. Lights flashed in many colors. Sounds of machines, voices, and alien calls filled the air. This place belonged to no single world. It was ruled by money, contracts, and power. Humans were rare here. Most species on the station were taller, stronger, or faster than humans. Some had thick skin. Some had claws. Some had sharp teeth and cold eyes. Humans were seen as weak labor, useful only for simple work. One human man named Eli pushed a cargo cart through a narrow corridor. The cart was heavy, filled with metal crates marked for off-station delivery. His shoulders ached. His hands were rough and scarred. He wore simple work clothes, faded and torn at the edges. Eli did not complain. Complaining changed nothing. He had worked on the station for 4 years. He slept in a small room near the lower docks. He ate cheap food. He sent what little credits he had left to no one. There was no one left to send them to. He kept his head down. That was how humans survived here. As Eli moved through the market level, he felt eyes on him. He always did. Some aliens watched him with curiosity, others with dislike, a few with hunger, though not for food. He ignored them all. Near a cluster of open stalls, Eli slowed down. The crowd was thick. Vendors shouted in strange languages. Creatures of many shapes passed each other, brushing shoulders, tails, and wings. That was when he heard it, a sharp, frightened sound. It was small, high-pitched, not like the loud voices around it. It cut through the noise like a crack in glass. Eli stopped. He turned his head slowly, trying to find the source. Most people around him kept moving. No one else seemed to care. Then he saw her. A small alien child stood near a closed cargo gate. She was no taller than Eli's chest. Her skin was smooth and pale blue. Large dark eyes filled her small face. She wore fine clothing, clean and expensive, far too expensive for this part of the station. She looked lost. 2 large figures moved toward her. They wore armor plates and carried shock weapons at their sides. Their faces were hidden behind masks. Their movements were slow but confident. Hunters. Eli's heart began to beat faster. The child stepped back. Her eyes widened. She tried to speak, but her voice shook. The men did not stop. One reached out a hand. Eli looked around. Security drones were far away. Guards were busy near the main hall. The crowd kept flowing, uncaring. This was not his problem. That thought came fast and cold. He had learned that lesson many times. He took one step forward. Then he stopped. Images flashed in his mind. A burning colony, screams. A small hand slipping from his grip years ago, a promise he failed to keep. Eli swore under his breath. He left the cargo cart where it stood. He walked toward the child. The 2 armored figures noticed him and laughed. One said something mocking in a rough voice. They did not slow down. Eli stepped between them and the child. The difference in size was clear. They were taller, stronger. Their weapons alone were worth more than Eli's life. "Leave," Eli said in simple trade speech. The figures paused. One tilted his head. "You move," the figure replied. "Human." Eli did not move. The child pressed herself against his back. He felt her shaking. The first blow came without warning. A heavy fist slammed into Eli's side. Pain exploded through his ribs. He gasped but stayed upright. The second blow hit his face. His vision blurred. Warm blood ran from his nose. The crowd began to slow. Some stopped to watch. None stepped in. Eli raised his arms not to fight but to shield. Another strike hit his shoulder. Something cracked. His legs shook. He fell to one knee. The child cried out. Eli pushed himself back up. The attackers cursed. One drew a shock baton and struck Eli across the chest. Electricity tore through his body. His muscles locked. He screamed despite himself. Still, he did not fall. He spread his arms wide, blocking the child completely. More blows followed. Each one drove him closer to the floor. His breath came in broken gasps. His body begged him to stop. He refused. At last, alarms sounded. Security drones swept into the corridor. The armored figures stepped back, weapons already hidden. They vanished into the crowd with practiced ease. Eli collapsed. He hit the floor hard. The world dimmed around him. Sounds became distant. He felt small hands gripping his shirt. The last thing he saw before darkness took him was the child's wide eyes staring down at him. Far away, beyond the station and its noise, a massive throne room sat in silence. The walls were black stone and living metal. Tall banners hung from the ceiling, marked with symbols of conquest and rule. Armed guards stood perfectly still along the edges. At the center, upon a raised platform, sat Queen Mara. Her form was tall and powerful. Her presence alone made others lower their heads. She ruled an empire that stretched across dozens of systems. Worlds had fallen at her command. In front of her hovered a small light display. On it played a recording, a trade station corridor, a lost child, two attackers. A human stepping forward. The queen watched without blinking. When the first blow struck the human, some of her advisors looked away. Others sneered. When the second and third blows landed, silence filled the hall. The queen's hands tightened on the arms of her throne. She watched as the human fell and stood again, watched as pain twisted his face, watched as he shielded the child with his own body. The recording ended with the human collapsing. For a long moment, no one spoke. "That human is weak," one advisor said carefully. "Yes," the queen replied, her voice was calm. "He gained nothing," another said. "No reward, no honor." "Yes," she said again. The queen stood. The room seemed to shrink around her. "That human did what none of my warriors did," she said. "He stood without reason, without command, without gain." Her eyes burned with a strange light. "He protected my child." Shock rippled through the hall. Orders were given quickly, quietly. Ships were prepared. Agents were sent. On the trade station, Eli lay in a medical bay. Machines hummed around him. His body was broken in many places. Doctors shook their heads at his survival. Eli drifted between sleep and pain. He did not know that the galaxy had noticed him. He did not know that a queen was coming. He only dreamed of standing still, arms wide, refusing to move. Eli woke to the sound of machines and quiet voices. His body ached everywhere. Every breath hurt. His arms and legs felt like lead. A dull, constant pain pulsed through him, reminding him he was still alive. He tried to move his hand and winced. Bandages and splints held him together. He tried to speak, but his voice was weak, barely more than a whisper. "Is the child safe?" The medical assistant, a tall, gray-skinned alien with many arms, shook his head slightly. Yes, she is safe, but you must rest." "You are badly hurt." Eli tried to understand. Safe. That meant she survived. That was enough. Far from the station, on a massive starship orbiting a red gas giant, Queen Mara watched a live feed of Eli in the medical bay. She did not need cameras to see. The bond between her and the child allowed her glimpses, moments that others could never witness. She had seen everything. She had watched the human take blow after blow without moving away, without hesitation. Her advisors murmured quietly around her. One, a thin, sharp-eyed alien named Vara, whispered, "She is weak to admire a human." Mara's eyes narrowed. "Weak," she repeated. "Perhaps, or perhaps strong. There is courage here that my warriors have never shown. Sacrifice without gain. Action without reason." "That is different." Another advisor, a reptilian creature with armored scales, hissed, "We should not reward him. Weakness does not belong in our empire. He could bring chaos. He could teach our enemies what to expect from humans." Mara leaned forward on her throne. Her hands gripped the edges so tightly the metal beneath her fingers bent slightly. "I will decide his fate. No council, no vote. Find out who he is. Learn everything about him, every battle he has survived, every choice he has made, and bring him here if possible." Back on the station, Eli's body healed slowly, though his mind raced. He could not understand why anyone would care about him. He was a worker, a human, a nobody in the eyes of most species. Yet somewhere far away, someone powerful had noticed. Security had been tight after the attack. Patrols moved more often. Some visitors avoided the area entirely. Eli noticed their stares, the whispers. He wondered if anyone knew why he had stepped in, why he had taken the blows. He tried to push the thoughts away and focus on healing, but his sleep was restless. Dreams of the child, the attackers, and the sound of blows echoed in his mind. Each dream left him sweating, exhausted, trembling. Meanwhile, on Mara's ship, the investigation into Eli began. Crew members dug into databases spanning dozens of systems. They traced every record, birth certificates, work history, minor legal infractions. At first, there was nothing extraordinary. He was a simple human, not a soldier, not a hero. No special abilities, no hidden technology. But then they found it. A record of a colony destroyed years ago on a world near the Empire's borders. A young human child survived. A small group, really, but Eli had been among them. Records indicated he had led survivors, protecting them with whatever tools were at hand. He had lost family, friends, everything, yet continued to move forward. He had made impossible choices to save others. Mara studied the reports carefully. Her sharp eyes scanned the pages, reading every detail. A human who stands for others without gain, survives where others fall, continues despite loss. Her voice was quiet, almost thoughtful. This is no ordinary human. Perhaps there is more to them than strength measured in battle alone. Advisors argued. Some said humans could not be trusted. Others suggested using Eli for propaganda, showing that even weak species could serve the Empire. But Mara did not answer. She had already made a choice in her mind. She would see this human herself. The days passed slowly for Eli. He began physical therapy, learning to walk again without collapse. The child, Luma, remained under the care of her own attendants. She would visit the medical bay briefly, always watching him with curious, silent eyes. One evening, as the artificial lights of the bay dimmed to mimic night, Eli looked out the small viewport at the stars. He wondered why anyone would care about him, why a child's mother, powerful beyond imagining, might notice his actions. The thought seemed impossible. Humans were insignificant in the galaxy. But he remembered the child's face, the trust, the fear, and the tiny spark of relief when he shielded her. That small spark had changed everything, though he did not yet realize how much. Far away, Mara stood on the balcony of her ship, overlooking the red gas giant below. Her mind replayed the human's actions again and again. She had sent ships, agents, and investigators. She had watched him through the child's link. Every moment of courage, every choice to protect, every refusal to flee had been recorded in her memory. Her advisors waited. One finally spoke. "Your Highness, if you summon him, he may not survive our world. Our empire, it is not gentle. He may not endure." Mara turned slowly, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. "I do not seek to test his strength against ours," she said. "I seek to understand him. The way he acts, the way he stands. Perhaps the galaxy has much to learn from a human who does not move." Back on the station, Eli's recovery continued. Each day, small improvements came. He could lift his arms without assistance. He could walk short distances without falling. Yet every movement reminded him of the blows he had taken. Pain lingered in every joint. Bruises marked his skin like silent witnesses. The child, Luma, appeared one afternoon at his bedside. She did not speak. She simply held out her small, blue hand. Eli hesitated, then gently took it. Her grip was surprisingly strong for her size. Her eyes, large and dark, held something human could understand: trust, curiosity, and a quiet demand that he continue to protect. Eli smiled faintly. "I will," he whispered. Luma tilted her head, her eyes reflecting the soft lights above. Then she turned and left without a word. Eli knew she would return. Somehow, he knew that the bond between them had begun, and it would grow stronger than anything he had ever known. Far above, Mara prepared. Ships were refitted. Plans were made for safe travel. She did not intend to meet him as a prisoner. She intended to meet him as someone whose courage demanded her attention. The galaxy was changing, though Eli did not yet realize it. His simple act of standing in the path of danger had drawn the eyes of one of the most powerful beings alive. His choices had consequences far beyond his understanding, and the Queen, watching silently, waited. She would see the human who had done the impossible, taken blows for her child and refused to move. And when she met him, the universe itself would shift. Eli did not know how long he had been asleep when he awoke to a strange vibration and a new kind of quiet. The hum of machinery was deeper, steadier. No market noises, no shouting, no alarms, just the low, powerful pulse of a massive vessel. His body ached in ways he had not known were possible. Bones still protested every movement and his muscles trembled under the weight of fatigue. A soft voice spoke from the shadows. "You are awake." Eli turned his head slowly. A tall figure stepped forward, not threatening but commanding. Her presence filled the room before she even spoke again. Her skin was pale, her eyes a deep, commanding amber. She moved with purpose, each step precise, deliberate. "I am Queen Mara," the figure said. The words carried weight, though they were calm. "You have protected my child. I wish to know why." Eli tried to rise, but pain pinned him to the medical table. He shook his head. I didn't think. She was afraid. Someone had to stand there." The Queen observed him closely. Few had ever answered her with honesty, fewer still with such simplicity. Her advisors whispered behind her, murmuring their doubts. "She is weak," one hissed. "She should strike him down." Mara ignored them. "Few in my empire would act as you have. Few would value the life of a child over their own safety. And yet you did. You risked everything, and for nothing." Eli tried to sit up, wincing at the pain. "I don't know why it matters. I am just a human, a nobody." The Queen studied him. The corners of her mouth lifted slightly, as if to smile but never fully. "A nobody. Humans are often dismissed. Yet your actions speak louder than the strongest warrior of my empire. Tell me, human, have you ever faced such danger before?" Eli's mind raced. Memories he had tried to forget returned. He remembered the border colony, the fire, the screams of children, the collapse of buildings, the faces of those he could not save. He remembered leadership he had never wanted, decisions that had haunted him for years. And yet he had survived. Somehow he had survived. I've seen worse," he admitted quietly. "I've done what I could to keep others alive, even when it cost me." Mara nodded, her expression unreadable. "It seems your courage is born not of pride or ambition, but necessity." "That is rare." Suddenly the ship shuddered violently. Warning lights flashed, red and urgent. The Queen's advisors stiffened, alarmed. Eli's eyes widened. He had not expected anyone else to find him here, not so soon. "Attack," one advisor hissed. "The Shadow Fleet." "They have tracked the human." Mara did not flinch. "No," she said firmly. "They will not touch him, not while I am alive." Within moments, the ship's corridors filled with the sounds of battle. Alarms blared, metallic clangs echoed, and the ground shook as enemy boarding pods slammed against the hull. Eli's first instinct was fear, but it was replaced quickly with clarity. He had protected others before. He could do it again. The Queen moved beside him, her presence commanding. "You will stay close," she instructed. "I do not intend to hide you. You will fight if necessary, and I will watch. Learn human." Eli swallowed hard. He could barely stand, yet he nodded. He had no choice. The child's life, and now the Queen's, depended on him. The first wave of attackers breached the outer corridors. They were fast, lethal, and ruthless. Humans would have been crushed in seconds. But Eli noticed small openings, weak points in the armor of the invaders, patterns in their movement that others overlooked. He moved carefully, using his mind instead of brute strength. He directed crew members to block paths, to trip and mislead the attackers. Simple strategies, small distractions, yet effective. The queen observed silently, her eyes following every movement. This human, fragile as he was, thought differently. His survival depended not on strength but on perception. She found herself impressed, surprised even. One attacker broke into the medical bay. Eli raised a simple metal rod, a piece of equipment used for lifting, and swung it with all his might. The attacker stumbled, surprised by the human's determination. Another strike, and the alien fell unconscious. Luma's cries echoed somewhere nearby. Eli rushed toward her, pain burning in every step. He found her cornered in a small chamber, the child's large eyes filled with terror. Without thinking, he pushed himself between her and the attackers. "Go, hide," he shouted, voice strained. The queen followed silently, her hand raised in a subtle gesture that sent a shockwave through the attackers, knocking several to the ground. Eli realized as he moved that her power was immense, yet she allowed him to take the lead. Not because he was strong, but because she wanted to see what he could do. Minutes passed like hours. Each decision was critical. Each mistake could cost lives. Eli's body screamed in protest. Every step reminded him of the injuries he had barely survived. Yet he pushed forward, shielding Luma, guiding her through the narrow, winding corridors. Eventually, they reached a secure chamber, heavily reinforced. The child hid behind Eli as he leaned against the door, gasping for breath. His muscles trembled, but his mind remained sharp. The queen stepped forward, placing a hand lightly on Eli's shoulder. "You have done well," she said. Her voice was calm, yet it carried the weight of the galaxy. "Few would survive this long, let alone protect my child. Few would even try." Eli shook his head, still struggling to catch his breath. I don't deserve praise, I just did what anyone should have done." Mara's eyes glinted with something Eli could not name. Respect, curiosity, something else deeper and more dangerous. "You are different, human. The galaxy will not forgive weakness, yet here you stand, still breathing, still fighting, still protecting. That is remarkable." Outside, the sounds of battle faded. The Shadow Fleet had been repelled, their attack unsuccessful. Ships exploded in the distance, their pieces burning in the void. The Queen's forces had been efficient, but the humans' actions had made the difference, guiding key points, saving lives that would otherwise have been lost. Eli sank to the floor, exhausted, every bone and muscle screaming in protest. He had done it. They were safe for now. Luma climbed onto his lap silently, gripping his arm. Eli looked down at her and managed a tired smile. "See, you're safe," he whispered. The queen remained nearby, silent, observing. Her mind was already racing. This human was not a soldier, not trained. Yet his actions had shifted the battle. He had survived where others would have fallen. He had protected her child when she could not. She realized then that this was no ordinary human. Perhaps humans had strengths her empire had never understood. Perhaps their value had been underestimated. As the queen's advisors tended to the wounded and repaired damage, Mara spoke softly to Eli, almost as if to herself. "You will not remain hidden, human. The galaxy has eyes. There are forces that would see you destroyed for what you have done, and yet I will protect you." Eli looked up, confusion mixing with exhaustion. "Why, I am just a human. I am nothing to you." The queen's amber eyes fixed on him, unwavering. "You are not nothing. You are something rare. You are someone who stands when others fall, and that changes everything." Eli did not know what to say. Words failed him. He had never been considered important. He had never been needed. Yet here in the queen's presence, he realized that his small choices, the ones he thought meaningless, had become something far greater. And somewhere deep in the galaxy, he understood. His actions had set events in motion that would ripple far beyond his understanding. The battle had ended, but the war for the human's life and the Queen's trust had only just begun. Eli's recovery continued slowly. Every morning he woke to pain and exhaustion, yet he moved forward, guided by instinct, experience, and a sense of responsibility. The medical teams on the Queen's ship were careful and thorough, repairing bones, treating bruises, and monitoring every vital sign. But even the most advanced technology could not ease the fatigue in his muscles, the lingering aches in his joints, or the heaviness in his chest. Luma, the child he had protected, never left his side for long. She followed him through the corridors of the ship, quiet and observant. She did not speak much, but her presence was constant, a reminder that the danger he had faced had a human, an alien meaning. Eli had saved her, yet her survival now tied him to her and to the Queen in ways he barely understood. Queen Mara had made it clear that he was under her personal protection. This statement shocked the ship's council. Humans were not usually given such honor. Many saw it as a mistake, an indulgence that could undermine her rule. Others feared the repercussions. If word spread that a human had the Queen's favor, rival factions and enemies across the galaxy would see it as a weakness to exploit. Eli, however, thought little about politics. He had learned to act when necessary, to take responsibility when no one else would. He focused on simple things: healing, moving, protecting those around him. The Queen observed his behavior closely, sometimes silently, sometimes with questions designed to test his thinking and judgment. One day, as Eli moved slowly along a corridor, he noticed subtle signs that not everything on the ship was as secure as it seemed. A door left slightly ajar, an unusual flicker of light along a hallway, small footprints that did not match the usual crew. He mentioned it to the Queen's security officers. They dismissed him at first, assuming fatigue or paranoia, but Eli persisted. Humans had a way of noticing details others overlooked, born of necessity and survival in dangerous environments. His persistence proved correct. That very night, a shadow fleet attempted a covert boarding of the ship, aiming to kidnap the Queen and Luma. Eli, weak and exhausted though he was, alerted the crew in time to prepare defenses. His knowledge of simple tactics, hiding, misdirection, traps, proved invaluable. Where the Queen's soldiers relied on power and weapons, Eli relied on strategy and observation. Small groups of attackers were diverted, captured, or driven off before reaching their targets. Queen Mara watched the events unfold silently. She was impressed by his resourcefulness, his ability to think quickly under pressure. Her empire had produced soldiers trained from birth, hardened and brutal, yet they often acted predictably. Eli's decisions were unconventional, driven by intuition and courage rather than training. The Queen recognized that his human perspective offered her forces an advantage no one else could provide. After the threat had passed, the Queen summoned Eli. She did not scold, she did not question, she simply studied him. "You survive by seeing what others do not," she said. "Your value is not in strength but in perception and action. Few understand this. You understand it instinctively." Eli, breathing heavily, nodded. "I do what I must. I don't think about value, I just act." Mara's eyes softened slightly, a rare display of emotion for one so feared. "That is why I will keep you close, not as a soldier, not as a tool, but as someone whose courage and insight may change the future of my empire." As days passed, Eli began training with a small group of elite officers, not in combat but in strategy and defense. He taught them methods of thinking differently, using terrain, predicting enemy moves, working in coordinated patterns that relied on intelligence and observation rather than raw force. Many officers resisted at first, unwilling to accept guidance from a human. But when his ideas consistently saved lives and prevented disaster, respect began to grow. Eli remained humble, often retreating to quiet spaces aboard the ship when the day's lessons and duties ended. Luma followed him sometimes, speaking little but watching and learning from his behavior. The bond between them deepened. He became both protector and mentor in small ways, teaching her courage, patience, and awareness. The Queen's advisors grew uneasy. They whispered that the human was influencing decisions, subtly changing how the Empire's forces operated. Some saw it as dangerous, some as a sign of a potential alliance that could strengthen the Empire. Mara ignored the gossip. She understood that Eli's value went beyond conventional measures of power. His courage, his willingness to act for others, and his insight into unpredictable situations made him unique. Eli's influence continued to grow when intelligence reports revealed a new threat, a rival empire assembling a fleet to challenge the Queen. Conventional military tactics suggested overwhelming force and preemptive strikes. Eli suggested a different approach: focus on protecting vulnerable positions, create traps and diversions, and use smaller, mobile units to confuse and delay the enemy. The Queen hesitated but allowed him to implement his plan on a limited scale. The results were remarkable. The rival fleet advanced, expecting quick victories, but found themselves repeatedly stalled and outmaneuvered. Casualties mounted, not due to strength alone, but because Eli's strategies exploited weaknesses they had not considered. News of these successes spread quickly across the Empire, surprising both allies and rivals. Despite his successes, Eli remained grounded. He did not seek recognition. He simply continued to act where needed, guided by instinct, courage, and a sense of responsibility. The Queen noticed this constantly. He did not seek power, wealth, or praise. His motivations were simple yet rare, protecting those who could not protect themselves. One evening, the Queen stood beside Eli as he reviewed tactical reports. She spoke softly, almost contemplatively. "You have changed the way my officers see the battlefield. They trust your instincts more than mine in some situations, and yet you are not one of them. You are human, a species they often overlook. That is significant." Eli looked up, startled. "I'm just doing what seems right." Mara's gaze was steady. "That is why you are rare. You act without expectation. You see opportunity where others see risk. You protect without thought of gain. That is strength the Empire cannot measure." Her words stirred something within Eli, though he did not fully understand it. Recognition was rare in his life, yet here it came not as flattery but as understanding. For the first time, he felt that his choices, his actions, had meaning beyond survival. However, danger was never far away. Intelligence indicated that the rival empire would not give up. They were assembling larger forces, and spies within Mara's council suggested betrayals might occur. Eli's influence became even more critical. He had to anticipate threats, often before anyone else considered them. Every decision carried life-or-death consequences, not only for the Queen and Luma but for the Empire itself. Through it all, Eli grew stronger, though never invincible. Pain remained, a reminder of his humanity. His strategies saved lives, but they could not erase weakness. And the Queen, who observed him constantly, realized that his value went beyond tactics. It was his willingness to risk everything for others, a courage few beings, alien or human, ever displayed. The bond between Eli and the Queen deepened, subtle but undeniable. He had acted for her child when no one else would. He had refused to flee, refused to give up, refused to see life as negotiable when others were in danger. Mara understood, perhaps more clearly than anyone, that this human was no ordinary man. As the rival fleet prepared their next move, Eli stood beside the Queen on the observation deck, looking out at the stars. The quiet tension was almost suffocating. Yet in that moment he understood one truth: he was no longer merely a survivor. He had become a part of the Empire's future, a human whose courage could influence the course of a galaxy. And though danger would come again, and likely soon, Eli knew he was ready to face it, not for power, not for glory, but because he could not do otherwise. The shadow of war loomed over the stars. The rival empire's forces gathered, spies plotted, betrayal whispered through the halls of Mara's empire. Yet one human's courage, quiet but steadfast, had already begun to change the outcome. Eli, exhausted and in pain, stood resolute. And the queen, watching him, knew the galaxy would never be the same again because of him. Eli stood on the observation deck of the queen's flagship, staring out at the endless stars. The galaxy seemed calm tonight, but he knew the calm was only temporary. Threats never slept, and enemies were always ready to strike. Yet this night felt different. The air was charged with change. He could feel it in the hum of the ship, in the quiet confidence of the crew, and even in the steady presence of Queen Mara beside him. Mara did not speak at first. She simply observed him, noting the way he carried himself despite pain, fatigue, and countless battles. She had seen humans before, but never like him. Eli's courage was not born from desire for power, not from ambition, and not even from fear. It was born from something far simpler, far rarer, the need to protect others when no one else would. Finally, she spoke, her voice soft but commanding. "You have done more than survive, human. You have changed the way my empire thinks, the way my people fight, and the way I see the universe. Few beings, alien or human, could do that, and yet you ask for nothing." Eli shook his head, still staring at the stars. "I never wanted any of this," he said. "I just acted when I had to. That's all I know." Mara studied him silently. The weight of her empire rested on her shoulders, yet she found herself drawn to this human who defied expectation and risked everything for a child he barely knew. His presence reminded her of something she had almost forgotten, the value of courage, honesty, and selflessness. Over the next days, the galaxy held its breath. The rival empire that had attacked the Queen's forces retreated only temporarily, regrouping and preparing for a full-scale war. Mara called a galactic council, an assembly of rulers, ambassadors, and commanders from countless systems. It was expected that she would use the council to assert dominance, issue threats, or demand obedience. Instead, she surprised everyone. When the council gathered, she did not speak of conquest or punishment. She spoke of unity, of protection, and of a human who had stood in the path of danger when even her own soldiers hesitated. She told the story of Eli's bravery, how he had shielded her child, anticipated enemy movements, and acted with courage without expectation of reward. Gasps and whispers filled the hall. Humans were rare, often dismissed as weak. Yet here was a human whose actions had not only saved lives but had influenced the outcome of battles, strengthened an empire, and forced rulers to reconsider their strategies. After the council, Mara returned to Eli. She found him in the quiet of the ship's upper deck, looking down at the void. "You have changed more than battles, Eli," she said. "You have changed hearts. You have changed minds. And now, you must make a choice." Eli turned to her, confusion in his eyes. "A choice?" "Yes," she said. "I offer you freedom, safety, and honor. You can leave this empire with wealth and respect, returning to a life of quiet survival, or you can stay with me. Not as a servant, not as a soldier, but as a partner in shaping the future of my empire and protecting those who cannot protect themselves." Eli's mind raced. He had never considered such possibilities. He had survived, acted, and protected, but always as an outsider, always as someone beneath notice. Now, he was being given a chance to shape history alongside one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. He thought of Luma, the child whose life he had saved. He thought of the countless lives he could help protect, the people who might survive because he acted. He thought of the Empire, now guided not only by power but by the wisdom of someone who saw the world differently. Finally, he spoke. "I will stay," he said. Not for glory, not for power, but because I cannot walk away while others need help. I cannot ignore what I can change. Mara's eyes softened. She had expected courage, but not humility. She had expected strength, but not devotion. She understood now that this human was extraordinary not because he was powerful, but because he acted when others would flee, because he valued life above all else. The decision sent shockwaves across the galaxy. Rivals whispered, questioning the Queen's choice. Allies marveled, realizing that human courage could be a force no one had considered. And for Eli, life changed forever. He was no longer a simple worker, a survivor, or a nobody. He had become someone who influenced the course of empires, whose decisions could protect or endanger countless lives. Days turned into weeks. Eli trained, advised, and led with insight and caution. His methods were unconventional, relying on observation, understanding, and empathy rather than brute force. The Queen's soldiers learned to follow his guidance, and slowly the empire began to shift. Leadership balanced with strategy, strength tempered by awareness, and action guided by courage and foresight. Yet, despite the responsibilities, Eli never lost sight of what had mattered most, the child whose life had brought him into the Queen's world. Luma remained at his side, learning courage, patience, and vigilance. She asked questions, sometimes silent, sometimes curious, and Eli answered with care. He became not only protector but teacher, guiding her growth without overstepping. The Queen observed this quietly. She realized that Eli's influence was subtle but profound. He did not demand respect, he earned it. He did not seek recognition, he inspired it. And in the process, he had transformed the empire, teaching aliens and humans alike that true strength was not measured in power, weapons, or numbers, but in courage, empathy, and the willingness to act for others. Finally, after months of preparation and reflection, the Queen and Eli stood together on the observation deck, overlooking the galaxy that stretched endlessly before them. The stars were calm, yet the universe pulsed with life and danger, promise and uncertainty. Mara spoke softly yet firmly. "You have changed everything, Eli. Your choices, your courage, your willingness to act. They have shown me and my empire that strength is more than power. It is sacrifice. It is protection. It is action without thought of reward." Eli nodded, exhausted but resolute. "I will continue," he said. "As long as I can make a difference, I will continue. I cannot ignore what I see, what I can change." The Queen placed a hand on his shoulder. Her touch was gentle, commanding, and affirming all at once. "Then we will face the galaxy together," she said. "Not as ruler and subject, not as alien and human, but as partners in a future we will shape side by side." And so the galaxy learned a new truth. Humans may be fragile, often underestimated and dismissed by stronger, larger, or faster species. But when a human stands for someone else, when a human acts without thought of gain, even queens follow. Even empires shift. And courage, simple, unwavering, and selfless, becomes a force more powerful than any weapon. Eli's journey was no longer about survival. It was about choice, courage, and legacy. He had taken blows for a child and in doing so had changed the fate of the galaxy. His life, once quiet and unnoticed, had become a beacon of hope, courage, and possibility. And as the stars stretched endlessly before them, Eli, the human who had stood and not moved, understood at last that one life, one choice, one act of bravery could indeed shape the future of countless worlds. The galaxy was watching, and it would never be the same again.